you go to a job interview and you get asked, what are your strengths? They put you on the spot with this pointed question, right? And you're wondering what to say. Now let's get into it, because there's several principles at play when you get asked this question. Where to start? Let's see. How about something that a lot of younger people and people that are new to the whole job interview thing, something that they struggle with and that might not be apparent to them, and that is that strengths are relative. That means that everybody's going to have their own opinion on what's a strength and what isn't. For example, if you have, I'm sure, something about yourself that you're proud of, that you consider a strength, maybe it's a personality trait, maybe it's an accomplishment, maybe it's some education or experience that you have, right? And you are particularly proud of this. A lot of your sense of self-worth comes from this. And so naturally, when somebody asks you, what are your strengths? You feel a desire to immediately talk about this thing. The problem is that how do you know that that specific thing that you've said is what the other party is looking for, what they consider a strength? Let me give you an example. Let's say you work fast. Okay, now, all things being equal, this is a good trait, right? Working fast. However, perhaps you're talking to someone who really places a high priority on the quality of work, and they don't really care exactly how fast you are, as long as the work is error-free, right? So this is the person that you're talking to. Now, you've never met them before. You don't know their personality. You don't know their preferences. And they say, what are your strengths? And you say, oh, well, I'm a really fast worker. And what they hear is, oh, I go so fast that I don't put any particular care into what I do. I prioritize speed over quality and accuracy. And so you think this is a strength, you're proud of it, and they hear a weakness. And unfortunately, that was the first impression that you made. That was it. That was your chance. You said a bad thing. And so consequently, they're not very impressed with you, right? So this is a problem. Strengths are relative. What you see as a strength may not be what somebody else sees as a strength, depending on their personality or their background or what specifically they're looking for, right? And that's one factor that really complicates this question, right? For example, I mean, to give you a very obvious example, you go to a job interview and they say, what are your strengths? And you say, oh, well, I'm very handsome, right? Now, maybe the interviewer doesn't care about that, right? So they think, fail. Right? That's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that, you're very professional, or that you have all these accomplishments, or that you take great pride in your work, or that your ambition is to make it in this industry. So you're very driven and you're very interested to learn and all this kind of stuff. I would have accepted any of those answers. I didn't regard your answer as particularly good. You're handsome. What the hell does that matter? This is an accounting department. Being handsome is not necessarily something that accountants care about. I'm just kidding, but not really. I see there's 26 people here. Thank you for joining me today. If you guys have any questions, get in the chat. Let me know what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and I will help you out. Okay, so we are answering the question, what are your strengths? When you're asked this, what's the best answer? Okay, so hopefully I framed the problem for you by illustrating that principle. Okay, the question is, what can you say that this other person asking you the question will consider a strength, right? Do we have to guess what they place value on? Well, no, you want to try and avoid doing that. Okay? So let me just jump to the heart of this. Usually a good thing to say is something that you know they care about. Now, how do you know what they care about if you've never met them before? Well, they have produced a job posting that you've responded to, and on the job posting, they've explained what the job is, and usually a list of requirements. They're looking for somebody with these particular requirements. So obviously, having those things is presumably what they would consider to be good, right? So if they say, we're looking for somebody that has 5 years experience in this, or they have this skill, or they have this education. Now, presumably, if they asked you, what are your strengths? And you said, well, what I consider to be my strengths are that, first of all, I have this particular education, and I have 5 years experience doing this particular type of work, and I have this skill. Excuse me as I slap my microphone around, as I make my microphone my bitch. Right? So if you already know that they're looking for these, presumably, them hearing that you have these is a good thing. They'll regard that as a good thing, right? So when you are faced with a blank slate, a good thing to fall back on are the posted requirements of the job, right? That's probably the safest thing you can fall back on. Now, there are other options. For example, universal traits that it's a fairly safe bet that they would regard these as good. You don't know for a fact, but presumably they would. Like, for example, conducting yourself in a professional manner, understanding what is appropriate conduct for the workplace and what isn't. These would probably be good, right? It's very rare that people don't place any particular value on these things. Now, whether it's their highest priority or not is open to debate, but would they consider these a strength? It's a very safe bet that they would, right? Passion for your job, that would be another one of these, right? That it's a pretty safe bet. Okay, so that helps hopefully frame an answer. So my recommendation would be, if you sit down in the job interview, you don't know the other person, it's early in the interview process, you have no idea what makes them tick, what they place priority on, I would gravitate to the job requirements. That would be a good starting point. Now, if they want to ask you about specific other things, that's fine. They can state specifically what they want to know about, and then you can answer those questions. But just this open-ended question, what are your strengths? I would start with something very safe like that and very pertinent. Now, some other sort of principles or factors that come up when you're dealing with this question, things that I've heard are, let's see, I've tried to write them all down here, and I'm having problems reading my own notes, full disclosure. That's how professional I am. Sometimes people have an issue because what they stated in the job description, they said, we're looking for someone who has this, right? And you're a bit self-conscious because either you don't have that or you don't technically have that. What do you say? Do you avoid mentioning? Do you avoid any mention of that in the interview, hoping that they'll not bring it up and then won't discover that you don't actually have that, right? Is that the way to go? What if you don't have the thing? Bill, you said go down the job requirements. I have this, I have this, I have this. What if you don't have those, right? Well, here's the deal. Here's what's going on. You don't know when they created the job posting and they said that these 10 things or whatever are a requirement. You don't know if those are actually requirements, meaning it's a show-stopping deal breaker if you don't have it, or it's not technically a requirement. It's a nice to have, but it's not the end of the world if you don't actually literally have that thing. Okay? You don't know. All you know is that they said that we're looking for someone who has all of these. Okay? So if you get to the job interview and you're worried because technically a couple of the things that they said they wanted, you don't have, you don't have to worry, because the fact that they called you in for the interview signals to you that on paper, they consider you to be technically qualified. Okay? It is a waste of time for them to call someone down to an interview that on paper doesn't seem to be qualified. It looks like they can't do the job. If you're hiring for a medical doctor, as an extreme example, to do brain surgery, right? A rocket scientist or a brain surgeon to do brain rocketry. The problem is if you submitted a resume and it doesn't say anywhere on there that you have a medical degree, a degree in medicine, or are a fully qualified doctor, they're probably not going to call you in for an interview, right? It would be a waste of time to talk to someone who isn't a medical doctor and interview them for this job as a rocket surgeon or brain rocketist. And it wouldn't make any sense, right? So the fact that you're at the interview, that signals to you, and that suggests that on paper, assuming that nothing on your resume is a fabrication or a lie, you're qualified, right? So don't be too self-conscious about not quite having everything on their list. All they want to know is that everything on that list, it's not going to be a problem. Okay, so if they said, I want 5 years experience in this, and you're worried because you don't have 5 years experience, you got 2 years experience, don't worry about it. All they want to know is that, that issue, the experience of how to do this particular thing, that's not going to be a problem that's going to arise once they give you the job. Okay? I'm just going to finish this question before we go to questions. It's great that you guys are participating. We're getting some questions. I'm looking forward to answering those in a second. Now, because I get asked all this stuff, I've sort of written down the deal here. Now, so that's all well and good, but I've been asked okay, well, Bill, how do you answer the question? If they said on their job posting that they want someone with 5 years experience in this role before, and let's say you only have 1 year experience with this role, how do you answer the question when they ask you about it? If they call you on this, okay, here's what you can do. You can substitute experience for experience, or you can substitute education for experience, right? Or you could substitute vice versa, experience for education. Right? So if they say we're looking for someone who has this qualification and you don't have that, but you have some experience that would be relevant, you can say, well, I don't actually have that, but what I do have is I have this experience, which has seen me work in the role and have to deal with any scenario that you would expect to come up in that role. And I've already done that. I already know how to deal with it. And so I'm not particularly concerned about how I'm going to perform on the job because I have done this type of thing before. Something like that, where you're substituting experience for education, or vice versa, or one type of experience for another. Or another little handy thing I've heard that's good is if someone says, how many years experience have you done this? Or how much experience do you have in this? And you can say, well, I only have 1 year experience in that. However, I have worked with many coworkers that have 20 years experience in that. And I've never had an issue holding my own and performing the same as them in the same work scenarios as they encounter. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. I think I can certainly hold my own when it comes to doing this job. Something like that, right? So you can substitute experience for experience. Okay, and one final thing, if I can decipher what I've written here, which is pretty hard. See, I've written a text file, and all the text is all bunched together, and it's all in shorthand, which is really helpful. I should really stop doing this to myself. Okay, if you're going for an entry-level job, you have one other option, and that is when they say, what are your strengths? You can also pull out soft skills. You don't have to necessarily go to experience that you have or education you have or an accomplishment you have. Okay, you can also talk about soft skills, or traits. Like, for example, if you have great attention to detail, and the job most likely requires attention to detail, it's good to say that. You say, I have a personality, I'm a very detail-oriented person. I really focus on the details and I take it seriously. Accuracy is extremely important. And so you can also say that in response to this question. You can pull out a personality trait or, a soft skill like I have good communication skills. I've had experience presenting, so I know how to do a presentation, this kind of thing. That's an advantage I bring to this role. The problem with this, though, is that you have to guess as to which trait or soft skill that they would want to hear, right? What they see as valuable. So there's a little bit of a stretch there. Otherwise, That's how I'd recommend you answer this question. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. That's how I'd recommend you answer when someone says, what's your greatest strength? Or what is your strength? Or what are your strengths? Bottom line, go down the job requirements as listed on the job posting. And yes, you can bring that to a job interview. You can have it on the table. Don't be face down like this, reading it like that. Just to glance at. What can help is if you've highlighted the key words, all the different requirements. So when you get down there, you make sure, if possible, that you have all of those, right? Those would be talking points. Okay, so that's what I have to say about that. Hopefully that makes sense.